This is the Murder Express. I went to give it a sound check, but this is the first go.
It was a cold night in June. I had boarded a train to East End on what seemed to be just another normal night like any other. In all the world, on all the nights, on all the trains, I had to get on this one. I had to ride the Murder Express.
Yeah, because it said when I downloaded the game, the fact that every time you play it is random, apparently.
What was that? My God, he's been murdered.
Oh.
Victim died from a gunshot wound to the head. Yeah, that'd do it all right. Now, the questions become, where's the gun, and who pulled the trigger?
And why's he got a briefcase?
Looks like the victim handcuffed the suitcase to their wrist. Guess he really didn't want to risk losing whatever was inside. The murder doesn't seem to be motivated by money. Curious, that.
Should have been a picture of Keanu Reeves. There is a killer on the loose. While searching for clues, be careful not to get too close to anyone else when the lights go out.
I'm pretty sure I saw Dennehy carrying a rope before we got on board. I could hear Ramirez and Mr. Duval really going at it earlier. Not sure what they were arguing over, but it seemed intense. That's all I got, Inspector.
So, apparently had a bit of a tiff.
I saw
Is anything
Dennehy
unusual?
walking around with a rope earlier. I noticed Topon watching Mr. Duval's briefcase as we boarded earlier.
Mr. Topon.
That's all I know.
Gacy? What? It's Wayne Gacy.
I noticed Ramirez wandering around with a pipe earlier.
Ramirez seems very
I could hear
sus.
Doss and Mr. Duval shouting over something earlier. They were quite loud about the whole affair. Given how the other passengers have a tendency to pry into one another's affairs, well, it would be advisable to ask around to see what they know.
Yeah, and here's Jeffrey Dahmer. No way, it really is the Murder Express.
I think I saw Fisher brandishing a knife earlier. I believe I heard Doss and Mr. Duval fighting about something earlier. They seemed pretty angry with each other. If I knew more, Inspector, I would tell you.
No, you wouldn't. You'd have sex with me and then kill me. Doss. Bundy. Oh, Ted Bundy. Hey, guy.
I believe I saw Ramsey walking around with a gun earlier.
I think it was Ramsey.
I could hear Ramirez and
Oh.
Mr. Duval fighting
Ramirez,
about
right.
something earlier. It seemed pretty intense. I'd tell you more
Ramirez.
if I knew more, Inspector.
Ramirez had a gun. No, Ramsey had a gun. Oh, Dennehy, no.
I believe I saw Kemper waving around a rope earlier. I witnessed Berkowitz and Mr. Duval fighting about something earlier. They seemed pretty angry with each other. Circumstantial clues mean nothing without hard evidence to back it up. If you want to formally accuse a suspect, you must first locate the murder weapon.
That's some good advice. It's a good job I'm with a lot of murderers. So I've got to be careful. Oh, what Doss?
Well, I can recall seeing Kemper holding a rope earlier. Oh, I thought I might have heard Dahmer and Mr. Duval arguing over something earlier. They seem pretty ticked off at one another. I'm not really sure I know anything of real value, Inspector.
Suspect has a key.
Oh, I saw this key on the floor earlier. Do you think it goes to anything important?
Maybe the handcuff. Aha.
Oh, I saw this key on the floor earlier. Do you think it goes to anything important?
I haven't seen that on anyone else. Let's try the briefcase. All the lights have gone out. Fuck off, Casey. Ramsey, you had a gun.
I saw Dennehy walking around with a rope earlier. I noticed Topon watching Mr. Duval's briefcase as we boarded earlier. That's all I know.
Do we think it's Ramsey? Oh!
It was a cold night in June. I had boarded a train to East End on what seemed to be just another... What was that?
Alright, let's see if we can solve the case. At least we found out who it was that pushed in after.
My God, he's been murdered. Looks like the victim suffered a puncture wound in the chest. Seems like it only took one to do the job. Looks like the victim handcuffed the suitcase to their wrist. Guess he really didn't want to risk losing whatever was inside. The murder doesn't seem to be motivated by money. Curious, that.
I saw Kemper walking around with a gun earlier.
No, we're not after a gun.
I overheard Dahmer and Mr. Duval arguing earlier. It sounded pretty heated. That's all I know.
Who's dead? Did we find out his name?
I noticed Doss wandering around with a
Doss.
knife earlier. I could hear Fisher and Mr. Duval shouting over something earlier. They were quite loud about the whole affair. I'm afraid I wouldn't be able to say with any real certainty, Inspector. I think I saw Fisher brandishing a rope earlier. I believe I heard Fisher and Mr. Duval fighting about something earlier.
Doss is
They
a
seemed
suspect.
pretty angry with each other. If I knew more, Inspector, I would tell you.
Oh. Hey, Bundy.
I believe I saw Ramsey walking around with a rope earlier.
I love the fact that they all have murder weapons,
I
you
could
know.
hear Fisher and Mr. Duval fighting about something earlier. It seemed pretty intense.
Which one's dead?
I'd tell you
Oh,
more
Miss
if I
Fisher.
knew more, Inspector.
Alright, let's...
I believe I saw Dahmer waving around a pipe earlier. I witnessed Dahmer and Mr. Duval fighting about something earlier. They seemed pretty angry with each other.
A lot of people seem to fight each
If
other.
I
don't they?
hear anything, Inspector, I'll be sure to let you know.
I think it's you. Suspect has a key.
Well, I can recall seeing Ramirez holding a gun earlier.
She's gonna
I
stab
saw
me,
Topon
isn't she?
glaring at Mr. Duval's briefcase before back at the train station. I'm not really sure I know anything of real value, Inspector. Oh, I saw this key on the floor earlier. Do you think it goes to anything important? Oh, I saw this key on the floor earlier. Do you think it goes to anything important?
I want knives. So, do we think that... Now that we said that about the key, does that mean I can unlock these handcuffs?
Looks like the victim handcuffed the suitcase to their wrist. Guess he really didn't want to risk losing whatever was inside.
Maybe not. What's this? Oh. Now that you have recovered the murder weapon, the suspect can be accused of the crime using the journal. Right. So we know Doss had a knife. Need to speak to Berkowitz, Bundy, Gacy, and Topaz.
I'm pretty sure I saw Ramsey carrying a rope before we got on board. I could hear Fisher and Mr. Duval really going at it earlier. Not sure what they were arguing over, but it seemed intense. That's all I got, Inspector.
Oh!
It was a cold night in June. I had boarded a train to East End on what seemed to be just another normal night. What was that? Oh my God. He's been murdered. Looks like the victim suffered a puncture wound in the chest.
So it's another knife.
Seems like it only took one to do the job. Looks like the victim handcuffed the suitcase to their wrist. Guess he really didn't want to risk losing whatever was inside. The murder doesn't seem to be motivated by money. Curious.
I want to find the weapon first.
I'm quite certain I witnessed Fisher gallivanting about with a knife earlier. I believe I overheard Ramsey and Mr. Duval fighting about something earlier. It sounded like a rather toxic conversation. I'm afraid I cannot say for certain. My apologies, Inspector.
Oh.
I'm certain I saw Kemper waving around a knife earlier.
Oh, great. Kemper or Fisher.
I definitely heard Ramsey and Mr. Duval talking about something earlier. They seemed pretty mad with each other. Hey, if I knew more, Inspector, I'd tell you.
I'd say Fisher so far. And see if anyone else says anything about Fisher. Fisher arguing.
What did I see? Well, I guess I
There we
remember
go.
Miss Fisher walking around with a knife earlier. I think I heard Mr. Berkowitz and Mr. Duval fighting about something earlier. It sounded like they were pretty mad at each other. Well, I don't know anything else, Inspector.
Mr. Duval wanted me to hang on to this key until the end of the train ride.
Mr. Duval.
I saw Ramsey walking around with a knife earlier. Mr. Duval wanted me to hang on to this key until the end of the train ride. I noticed Doss watching Mr. Duval's briefcase as we boarded earlier.
Who did you say, Doc?
Mr. Duval wanted me to
Duval.
hang on to this key until the end of the train ride. I wish I could tell you more, Inspector.
You spoke to Berkowitz. Didn't we speak to
I
her?
saw Dahmer walking around with a gun earlier. I overheard Bundy and Mr. Duval arguing earlier. It sounded pretty heated. That's all I know.
I noticed Ramsey wandering around with a knife earlier.
Well, yeah, a fair few with a knife.
I remember seeing Topaz looking real hard at Duval's briefcase before we got on the train. I'm afraid I wouldn't be able to say with any real certainty, Inspector.
Let's wait for the lights to come back on.
I think I saw Ramsey mentioning that knife earlier. I believe I heard the buddy fighting about something earlier. He seemed pretty angry, Judge.
Has anybody said what Bundy had?
Inspector, I will tell you.
Don't know what Bundy had. Bundy's name's been mentioned a few times. Bundy's in here. Come back on, lights.
I believe I saw Borkowitz waving around a knife earlier. I saw Ramirez walking into Mr. Duval's briefcase as we got on the train earlier. Circumstantial mean nothing but hard evidence to back it up. If you want to formally accuse a suspect, you must first locate the murder weapon.
I believe I saw Berkowitz walking around with a knife earlier.
Let's see who asked to hold on to the key.
I remember seeing Ramirez staring at Mr. Duval's briefcase as we boarded earlier. I'd tell you more if I knew more,
I might as well not click
Inspector.
that other thing. I think it was Berkowitz. Let's find him. Who had the key? Not you.
Oh, well, I saw this key on the floor earlier. What do you think it goes to?
Oh. Bloody hell, you're tall.
Mr. Duval wanted me to hang on to this key until the end of the train ride.
No, Mr. Duval's the one who sent it. Shall we accuse Berkowitz?
Damn. Should have looked for more
Failed.
clues. Well, better luck next
It was
time.
Ramsey?
It was a cold night in June. I had boarded a train to East End on what seemed to be just another normal night like any other. In all the world, on all the nights, on all
Right,
the
tell you what,
trains,
let's do
I'd get this one.
What
What was that?
Piece of paper and I'll tell you how many people said heated arguments. Something.
My God.
Investigate. Gunshot.
It would appear the
Oh,
victim's head was
briefcase is
beaten in
open.
by a blunt object. A pipe or a baseball bat from the looks of it. Unless I missed my guess, it looks like we're dealing with one sick son of a bitch. The latch to the suitcase is busted open. Seems like whoever got in didn't have a key. Not like it slowed them down any. My guess is, whoever killed this man did so to get at whatever was inside.
Look at case.
The victim's wallet has been cleaned out. Typical indicator the killer was motivated by greed.
Money. So if we hear anything, any people say anything about, right, it's killer on the loose. Let's get the weapon. Right, we've got cable start from one end to another.
I'm certain I saw Dharma waving around a pipe earlier.
So we know Dharma. One.
I remember Ramsey glaring at Mr. Duval's briefcase as we bought it earlier.
Ram. See? One.
Hey, If I knew more, Inspector, I'd tell you.
I'm quite certain I witnessed Dennehy gallivanting about with a knife earlier. I believe I overheard Gacy and Mr. Duval fighting about something earlier. It sounded like a rather toxic conversation. All I can say is that it would be wise to be wary of suspicious characters, especially when the lights go out. It is likely the killer would be inclined to strike again if the opportunity were to present itself.
Only if any other people do die. He's Kemper.
What did I see? Well, I guess I remember Miss
Dennehy.
Dennehy walking around with a knife earlier. I think I heard Miss Doss and Mr. Duval fighting about something earlier. It sounded
Doss?
like they were pretty mad at each other. Well, I don't know anything else, Inspector.
I saw Gacy walking around with a rope earlier.
So I don't think it's
I
Gacy.
thought I heard Kemper and Mr. Duval arguing earlier. It sounded pretty heated.
Any other?
Knowing the motivation for the crime might help narrow down who committed the murder.
That just gives you clues on how to play the game and then it says no point kicking that.
I'm pretty sure I saw Dahmer carrying a pipe before we got on board.
Dahmer with the blunt weapon. Victim of any
I could
enemies?
hear Gacy and Mr. Duval really going at it earlier.
Gacy?
Not sure what they were arguing over, but it seemed intense.
I saw Topon walking around with a rope earlier.
Not bad to me.
I overheard Fisher and Mr. Duval arguing earlier. It sounded pretty heated.
Fish. 1.
I told Mr. Duval I could look after this key for him until we got off the train.
Gacy has suitcase key. Gacy has suitcase key. But it said it didn't look like somebody had the key, did they?
I noticed Berkowitz wandering around with a gun earlier. I could hear Kemper and Mr. Duval shouting over something earlier.
Kemp.
They were quite loud about the whole affair.
Right, lads, come on. Right, let me look at this. Did it say look like they had the key or didn't?
The latch to the suitcase is busted open. Seems like whoever got in didn't have a key. Not like it slowed them down any. My guess is, whoever killed this man did so to get at whatever was inside.
Didn't.
The latch to
have
the
key.
suitcase is busted open. Seems like whoever got in didn't have a key. Not like it
Didn't.
slowed them
Definitely
down
says
any.
didn't have the key.
My guess is, whoever killed this man did so to get at whatever was inside.
So it can't be Gacy. Turn the lights on. Dahmer's name was mentioned a few times.
I think I saw Doss brandishing a rope earlier. I believe I heard Gacy and Mr. Duval fighting about something earlier. They seemed pretty angry with each other.
Oh, I saw this key on the floor earlier. Do you think it goes to anything important?
And cuff for Doss. Is there anything unusual?
Well, I can recall seeing Kemper holding a knife earlier.
Kemper had a knife then.
I thought I might have heard Topin and Mr. Duval arguing over something earlier. They seemed pretty ticked off at one another.
Then
I believe I saw Topan walking around with a rope earlier. I remember seeing Dahmer staring at Mr. Duval's briefcase as we boarded earlier.
Ah, so Dahmer. Finally looked at the case.
I believe I saw Doss waving around a rope earlier. I witnessed Kemper and Mr. Duval fighting about something earlier. They seemed pretty angry with each other.
Come on, lights. Come on, lights. Right. So, Gacy and Doss and Topan had the thingy. Gacy has the key, so I don't think it's Gacy. Who else got mentioned a lot? Dahmer got mentioned. Gacy got mentioned 3 times, and Kemper got mentioned. Kemper's got the knife. Doss has the handcuff key. Doss has handcuff, Gacy has that. So do we think it's Topan? We need to find out what weapons they had. I'm gonna go for Topan.
Damn. Should have looked for more clues.
Bundy.
Well, better luck next time.
No one even mentioned Bundy arguing. Motherfuckers.
It was a cold night in June. I had boarded a train to East End on what seemed to be just another normal night like any other. In all the world.
Once again, we'll try once more.
What was that? It would appear the victim's head was beaten in by a blunt object.
Pipe?
A pipe, or a baseball bat from the looks of it. Unless I missed my guess, it looks like we're dealing with one sick son of a bitch.
Look at the case. Because they've obviously emptied the
The
case
latch
in the
to the
morning.
suitcase is busted open. Seems like whoever got in didn't have a key. Not like it slowed them down any. My guess is, whoever killed this man did so to get at whatever was inside.
No key.
The victim's wallet has been cleaned out. Typical indicator the killer was motivated by greed.
Wallet empty. Right. So I've got my things to tally. Right. So what we're going to do now is go to the far end of the train, come in, and speak to everyone. Is there anything
I
unusual?
believe I saw Ramsey waving around a pipe earlier.
Z. What?
I witnessed Dahmer and Mr. Duval fighting about something earlier. They seemed
Dahmer?
pretty angry with each other.
Oh, come on, lights.
I believe I saw Ramsey walking around with a pipe earlier.
2 people sitting with a pipe.
I could hear Berkowitz and Mr. Duval fighting about something earlier.
Go.
It seemed pretty intense. Gets a little harder to see when the train passes through a tunnel. Wouldn't want to be near the killer when that happens.
Do they all say?
Circumstantial clues mean nothing without hard evidence to back it up. If you want to formally accuse a suspect, you must first locate the murder weapon.
Well, I can recall seeing Gacy holding a knife earlier.
Pardon me.
I saw Ramirez glaring at Mr. Duval's briefcase before back at the train station.
Ramirez looked at the case. Any other info?
I'm not really sure I know anything of real value, Inspector.
What? This key? Well, you see, Mr. Duval wanted me to hang on to this key for him. He felt it shouldn't be on his person until we arrived in East End.
Right, so Dharma had the key, so it couldn't be him.
I think I saw Ramirez brandishing a knife earlier.
Dharma. Why it couldn't be? Has suit case key.
I witnessed Dennehy glaring at Mr. Duval's briefcase as we boarded earlier.
Dennehy? Any other info?
If I knew more, Inspector, I would tell you.
Right. Come here, guys, see? You see anything?
I noticed Ramirez wandering around with a knife earlier. I could hear Dahmer and Mr. Duval shouting over something earlier. They were quite loud about the whole affair. Given how the other passengers have a tendency to pry into one another's affairs, well, it would be advisable to ask around to see what they know.
Whoa!
It was a cold night in June.
Bitch!
I had boarded a train to East End on what seemed to be just another normal night like any other. In all the world, nights on all the train. What was that?
God damn it. Be nice, I just want to get one done. In 32 minutes and I still ain't successfully got one.
My God. He's been murdered.
Right.
Looks like the victim was strangled to death. Markings around the neck seem to back that much up. Now, the question is, why? Looks like the victim handcuffed the suitcase to their wrist. Guess he really didn't want to risk losing whatever was inside.
So we'll go fight. Look at case. Not sus. Looking at the case, I'd say it's not, because they haven't nicked it.
The murder doesn't seem to be motivated by money. Curious, that.
Wallet. Not empty. So, we're looking for people, rope and fight. That's what we want to find out, innit? Who his enemies were. There's the rope. So, we'll take you. I'll speak to you. Berkowitz.
I'm pretty sure I saw Kemper carrying a rope before we got on board.
Huh? One?
I could hear Kemper and Mr. Duval really going at it earlier. Not sure what they were arguing over, but it seemed intense.
Berko said Kemp for both. Makes him sus. He's either trying to, cover his own arse or...
I found this key on the floor earlier. I'm certain I've no idea what it unlocks.
So let's put not sus. Well, just because she has the key actually doesn't mean anything, does it?
I saw Berkowitz walking around with a knife earlier.
Oh, Burka. So, not Sussie's Burka. Knife. Ramsey. HC key.
I noticed Bundy watching Mr. Duval's briefcase as we bought it earlier.
Bundy. For the case. Right. God damn it!
It was a cold night in June. I had boarded a train to East End on what seemed to be just another normal night like any other. In all the world, on all the nights, on all the trains, I had to get on this one. I had to ride. What was that?
God damn it! I'm having one more go, and if I don't get it this time, then that's it.
My God, he's been murdered.
Right. First of all, necklace. Go on.
Victim died from a gunshot wound to the head. Yeah, that'd do it all right. Now, the questions become, where's the gun? And who pulled the trigger?
Briefcase.
Looks like the victim handcuffed the suitcase to their wrist. Guess he really didn't want to risk losing whatever was inside. The murder doesn't seem to be motivated by money. Curious, that.
Right. Okay. HCK. BCK. Sus. Not sus. Right. Let's get down to the nitty gritty. I'm gonna go to one end of the train. How come I already know that? How do I know that Burko has a knife and Ramirez did? How do I know that? Well, this says Kemp had a gun, so we'll go. But we'll... Oh shit! Right, I'm at the end.
Oh, this? I mean, hey, who knows? I mean, I don't even know how that got there.
Handcuff key. Fish. Fisher?
I'm certain I saw Ramsey waving around a rope earlier. I definitely heard Danaher and Mr. Duval talking about something earlier. They seemed pretty mad with each other.
Right.
I'm quite certain I witnessed Bundy gallivanting about with a rope earlier.
So Bundy had a rope.
I believe I overheard Ramirez and Mr. Duval fighting about something earlier. It sounded like a rather toxic conversation.
What did I see? Well, I guess I remember Miss Topon walking around with a pipe earlier. I think I heard Miss Tupon and Mr. Duval fighting about something earlier. Sounded like they were pretty mad at each other.
People.
I saw Ramsey walking around with a rope earlier. I thought I heard Topon and Mr. Duval arguing earlier. It sounded pretty heated.
Oh shit, I was lucky. I ain't moving.
I'm pretty sure I saw Gacy carrying a rope before we got on board.
Oh, you murderers
I
coming
could
on your
hear Topon and Mr. Duval really going at it earlier.
Topon.
Not sure what they were arguing over, but it seemed intense.
What weapon did Topon have? A gun.
I saw Doss walking around with a rope earlier. I overheard Gacy and Mr. Duval arguing earlier. It sounded pretty heated.
I noticed Dennehy wandering around with a gun earlier.
Den. For the gun?
I could hear Topon and Mr. Duval shouting or something earlier. They were quite loud about the whole affair.
Do we think it's Topon? Oh shit.
I think I saw Berkowitz brandishing a knife earlier. I believe I heard Berkowitz and Mr. Duval fighting about something earlier. They seemed pretty angry with each other.
Oh shit.
Mr. Duval asked me if I could hang on to this key for him during the ride to East End.
Doss.
Well, I can recall seeing Topon holding a pipe earlier.
Topon with a pipe?
I thought I might have heard Topon and Mr. Duval arguing over something earlier. They seemed pretty ticked off at one another.
Doss seems quite sus. Whoa.
I could hear Topon and Mr. Duval fighting about something earlier. It seemed pretty intense.
Damn. Should have looked for more clues. Well, better luck next time.
It was Denny. No, I'm not even retrying that. That's it. I've had enough.
It was a cold night in June. I had boarded a train to East End on what seemed to be just another normal night like any other. In all the world, on all the nights, on all the trains, I had to get on this one. I had to ride the Murder Express.
Go fuck yourself. I'll see you on the flip-flop.